Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, and today we're going to be looking at my official forecast as of September 24th of 2024 for the 2024 presidential election. We've got a new polling, we've also gotten a new update from Gallup, which is very interesting, and I have a new scorecard for all the pollsters, so I'm going to go ahead and display that for you guys as well and how that kind of changed my polling average. Make sure to hit the like button to subscribe if you want more content just like this. Make sure to comment down below, and guys, share this with your friends so we can get this analysis out on the algorithm. It'll definitely help get the message out to provide people with the most accurate analysis in the nation. And so right now, guys, Donald Trump is favored to win the presidency by a pretty decent amount. This is not what the mainstream media will tell you. This is not what these so-called expert pundits will tell you. He is leading in the national popular vote by anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 points. If we look at my national average, which essentially weighs all the party data to a target electorate, so I'm basically reweighing all the party ID data to a target electorate, and the reason why I'm doing this is because polls tend to oversample Democrats, and sometimes they'll oversample Republicans, but usually it tends to be the Democrats tend to be oversampled. But the good news is that this can account for both. If we would have found a response bias for Trump in against Biden, which there may have been one, if we would have found that, we could have actually deduced that and it would have reflected in the average. And the cool part about my polling average is that the polling doesn't reflect any response bias, because if the polls tend to have a more skewed sample, so like if a pollster goes from having an R+1 electorate to a D+8 electorate, it's clearly going to be a response bias within 2 weeks if that were to happen, for example. But the model essentially accounts for that in the polling average, so you're not going to see these huge swings everywhere. And so the pollsters are graded based on their sample size, the margin of error. Looking at all of the polls averaged out, we grade them on their margin, their sample, so how many voters they're polling right now, and their grade on undecideds. And when you go ahead and do that and also look at the sample type, so if they have a likely voter screen, they get an additional 250 points. Right now, the pollster with the highest pool is actually, believe it or not, I'm pretty sure it's actually Alice Intel at the bottom. They have a pretty big pool on the electorate here, and when you see this, all of the polls are essentially split up based on the weights that I have here, and when they all add up, essentially you get your final average. And when we look at this moving graph, what happened here after the debate is the Alice Intel poll came out and we switched to their electorate, because when we switched to their electorate, we actually found, when you go back to 2020 and apply their final poll electorate to our modeling, we actually find a Biden plus 5.1 percentage point popular vote margin. And what's very fascinating is Joe Biden, in our average for 2020, gets 50.8%. He got 51.3%. If we look at Donald Trump, 45.7%, he's getting 46.9%, guys. So literally, this is the most accurate polling average you could have found out there. And this is with all sorts of pollsters that were accurate, some that were not accurate, like literally a bunch of different pollsters. I actually think that if we had the grading of the scores, like if we had score ratings for a lot of these pollsters here that have zeros, I actually probably could get it even closer. Believe it or not, I actually think I could get it even closer if I were to be able to find the scores for these polls back in 2016. I'd probably be able to get it even closer to what it actually was. But applying the Alice Intel poll actually allowed us to get a pretty accurate, not only a spread, but a pretty accurate sample, and basically only 3.5 undecideds, which is really good. And looking at the average now, basically compared to yesterday and today, we added in the new Quinnipiac poll. All pollsters in my scorecard, which you can see right here, you can find this on my X account. You can see I have a scorecard where I basically put the average of all the polls from October 2nd to November 2nd of 2020, and you see their margin, which CNN had the worst average of 13.5 point Biden win, an error of 9 points. So all of these polls right here that are in the F tier, we don't even include them in the average. We don't even include them because they're just so abysmal that they're gonna actually mess up the average for us. Like, they're actually gonna like really mess it up. So funny enough, this is all these polls, we removed them, and basically all the polls that were not on the scorecard, we essentially removed those as well. A lot of these pollsters have had history going back to 2016, and so that's why we kind of just went with these, and they were on the 538 scorecard that Nate made about 4 years ago. And so looking at that, he's up by around 2.8 percentage points right now. And when you look at the A-rated aggregate, which is just the pollsters with an A rating, with the same exact process, with the same electorate from Alice Intel, which is the most accurate pollster in the nation, and not only that, is the most accurate pollster internationally. And we see here that the poll with the highest amount of poll is actually Alice Intel and Big Poll Data, which were pretty close back in 2020. They were the closest out of all of them. And we see right here that Donald Trump currently leads the aggregate by roughly 3.2%. And Atlas Intel had Trump plus 3.6 now. And they tend to undersample Donald Trump, actually. And in 2020, they got Biden plus 4.7, and the popular vote was Biden plus 4.5. Now, you may say, oh, why is the popular vote so important? Don't you need to figure out the battleground states? Well, the thing is, if you can figure out the national popular vote margin, you can essentially figure out where the states are going to go, because you can track the trends in all of the states and look at demographic modeling, looking into the crosstabs and basically using a demographic model like the one from 538 or the Cook Political Report, which is the one that we're actually using now, and looking at what that is showing, at least what the accurate pollsters are showing. When you model out those demographics and when you average them out, you get a demographic model that you can include in the average as well for your model that will also help you be more accurate. By the way, we did this exact same thing for 2020. I'll actually go ahead and pull up my 2020 model, the actual workings of it. But if we go to 2020 and we look at my averages, I did state polling averages, by the way, for now and 2020. And in 2020, all my state polling averages that I did basically get the winner correct. And the margin is essentially within the margin of error in most of the states. And believe it or not, the deep blue states that had less polling, it's actually more inaccurate, because you need more pollsters in order to kind of fill up the sample. Because again, the pollster, these polling averages actually do better when the samples are actually higher. The more polls they're in these type of aggregates, the better it is, because it's able to be more representative of the actual electorate. And so when you look at this, you look at the demographic model from Alice Intel, Rasmussen Reports, Big Poll Data. If you look at the 2020 margin, looking at my spread in the national popular vote, and you look at this, guys, it is just spot on. It's practically perfect. And if you look at my polling averages and my estimates from 2020, I have basically had them memorized / written down. And whatever polling averages I created, I basically replaced my estimates with those just to prove that I could get it right. Looking at my demographic model, you can also see that roughly give or take, he's doing, I believe Biden was getting like 290 to 248 in the demographic model. And then in 2020, you see with the popular vote, because what it is you track the trend from 1996 to 2016 based on the tied popular vote and how that would all the states would vote in those elections, and you track the trend. You apply this trend to the 2020 NPV. And when you do that, you basically plug it in here, and then whatever the popular vote is, that's going to dictate where that votes, and that also can help you pretty much accurately predict the election too. So when you basically plug in the model, you really get a model that's as accurate as you could have gotten. I mean, North Carolina 0.2, Trump won the state by 1.3%. Like, that's literally perfect. And looking at Wisconsin, Biden plus 1.5, it ended up being Biden plus 0.6. Biden plus 1.6 in Pennsylvania, that it was Biden plus 1.2. Michigan, Biden plus 3.2, and ended up being a 2.8 percentage point margin. So the same thing that I'm doing now, looking at the demographic modeling from the accurate A-rated pollsters, looking at the popular vote estimate that I have, and looking at my state polling averages, we get Donald Trump on our website winning the Electoral College very, very handily. We have him winning the Electoral College very easily. And now with the updated popular vote margin, you're going to see a lot of tilt states, and you're going to be like, what is going on here? I mean, essentially, Oregon and Washington are going to be closer than last time. They were safe states last time. I mean, 19 points for Biden, 16 points. But the problem for Harris is she's underperforming with non-college voters and underperforming with college-educated voters as well. And that's going to cost her in all the states. Colorado is going to be a likely margin of about 7 to 8 points. Illinois, 8 to 9. He's probably going to gain in Chicago quite a bit. And he gained in urban areas already, by the way. I mean, he already gained. And in the state of New York, it's actually going to be under a 15-point win. I don't know why I have it safe, but if anything, it's actually going to be closer than that. It actually right here is literally a 10.5-point win for Kamala Harris. It's a pretty not competitive race, but it's closer. And even polling suggests that Harris is going to do far worse here. I mean, she's polling ahead by 12 points against Trump. Biden, in their final poll from Siena College around this time 4 years ago, has Biden up 32, and he only won the state by a little bit over 23 percentage points. So guys, it's just everything is lining up to a big win for Donald Trump in the Electoral College. And if he's performing in the popular vote 7.5 to 8 points better, you can kiss Florida goodbye. I don't know why Democrats think they can win Florida. And guys, North Carolina and Georgia are gone too. They're gone because if Donald Trump is outperforming with non-college, which is the main demographic that's driving him to a big win against Kamala Harris, that's what's pushing him over. And especially non-college men is what's really pushing him over. And you even saw this in the Rasmussen polling and in the New York Times polling. They have Donald Trump up by roughly 3 or 4 points with those both pollsters in Georgia, and those samples are actually pretty left-leaning samples for the electorate in Georgia. If anything, they should be redder. Even Rasmussen report said he thinks that Donald Trump's going to outperform that polling, and Nate Cohen has stated some concerns he's had about his own polling from the New York Times having a response bias for Democrats as well. North Carolina, I expect Donald Trump to do just fine in. I think he's actually, in our model, he's up by a lot. He's actually up by, I think, a little bit, almost 9 in North Carolina. That may be a little bit of an overestimation. But if you think about it, it actually makes sense because what was the popular vote for Biden 4 years ago is Biden plus 4.5, and Trump won the popular vote, or won North Carolina by 1.3. And the states actually moved with the national popular vote for the last 3 cycles. Like, it's been a stagnant state. It doesn't really trend anywhere. So if it's going from Trump plus 1.3 to Trump plus 9, and you see about an 8-point shift in the national popular vote to the right, you're going to see it happen in North Carolina as well. So it actually makes perfect sense that Trump would be up by 8 or 9 points in North Carolina based on the popular vote estimate that I've given. Arizona is also, you could kiss that goodbye. I mean, you could kiss that goodbye. It's gone. It's probably about a 6.5, 7 point win for Donald Trump. He's probably going to run it up in the Phoenix area in Maricopa County. And in Nevada, it's almost a 5-point win. It's literally like a 4.8 percentage point margin for Donald Trump. It's almost a likely state. It's so freaking close to being in the likely category. Wisconsin is in the likely margin as well of about 6 points. And when we looked at those Quinnipiac polls, New York Times polls yesterday and today, when you looked at those polls, those bad rated polls, when you look at the shift, he's up by quite a bit, believe it or not. Especially the new Quinnipiac poll, Donald Trump is killing it in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. When you look at the average shift, Pennsylvania, the same thing. We have him up, I think, 5.9% in the state. And in all the swing states, the mail-in vote is not looking great for any of the Democrats at all. Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Rhode Island are in the likely column right now. Maine's first is in the likely column right now. Or actually, believe it or not, it actually is safe. Oh, that's weird. They're both safe. Interesting. Very, very weird stuff. So apparently it is actually a safe state. But when you look at Maine, this is what's interesting, guys. Virginia in this forecast is literally like a 1.3 percentage point win. And when you look at the turnout in Virginia, a lot of those deep red Republican districts, we don't know which way the votes are breaking, but they have way higher turnout right now than a lot of the blue districts. So it's not a good sign for Democrats. And that's the early vote / mail-in, by the way, that Republicans are having higher than expected turnout. So that's not a good sign for them either. And in New Mexico, Donald Trump is roughly, give or take, probably down by about 2 or 3 points but I still feel like my model may even underestimate in here because of the way the Hispanic vote's shifting. Like, really, if he's winning Texas by over 15, New Mexico actually has a shot at being competitive. And when you look at this, look at all the states. I mean, Michigan is going. It's gone right now for Kamala Harris. Trump's probably winning it by 3 or 4. And looking at all the tilt states, they're all blue states. All of them. They're all blue states. Minnesota is within essentially half a point. New Hampshire just fell under a point. It basically rounds out to a point victory. Maine at large is a tilt margin, and so is Nebraska second. So literally Minnesota, Nebraska, Maine at large, and New Hampshire are all tilt Democrat in this new forecast. They're all super close. Like, if Trump were to pick all these off, he actually would be headed for a 329 victory in the Electoral College, which is very fascinating. And they're within the margin of error. They are. They're literally they're within the margin of error. So it's like, guys, I think people really need to get ready for a big Trump win. I mean, Minnesota, they've been panicking about that. Polls that overestimated Hillary and Biden by 3 or 4 points in the state have Harris up by 1 or 5, or like 4 or 5 now. Nebraska second's a little bit unpredictable, but I still suspect it's going to trend left pretty hard. That's why it's still Democrat, despite the popular vote being like R+3. And looking at Maine, what's interesting is we've gotten reports from both campaigns that apparently the internals in both campaigns are competitive in Maine at large. So again, that matches up. And New Hampshire, the same thing. I mean, she just went to go campaign there the other day. Why would she have to go campaign in New Hampshire if she was up by 7, 8, 9 points? Probably even 10. Honestly, if this was a quote-unquote competitive race where both candidates had an even playing field, New Hampshire should be like a 10, 11-point victory for the Democrat. Like, they should be killing it in New Hampshire, but she's not killing it in New Hampshire. And they're going to be close. And so right now, this is the forecast for today's video. Donald Trump is getting 312 Electoral College votes to Kamala Harris's 226 Electoral College votes. Make sure to hit the like button to subscribe if you guys want more content just like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.